Hello, this is Karina Okotel, and this is the weekly wrap-up. After passing a national security law last month criminalising any act of secession, subversion, undermining the power or authority of the central government, or collusion with foreign or external forces, 12 pro-democracy candidates for Hong Kong's Legislative Council elections to be held in September have been disqualified. The Chinese government said these candidates were unfit on the grounds that they advocated for or promoted Hong Kong's independence, solicited intervention by foreign governments in Hong Kong's affairs, and expressed an objection in principle to the imposition of the national security law by central authorities in Beijing. In its statement announcing the disqualifications, the Chinese government said that there is no question of any political censorship, restriction of the freedom of speech, or deprivation of the right to stand for elections as alleged by some members of the community. Is anyone else confused by this statement? If so, you're not alone. I think it embodies the very definition of gaslighting. While the focus at the moment is looking after the health of all Australians during this pandemic, government and the Australian people should never lose sight of the fundamental importance of every citizen's individual welfare, particularly where there has been a gross miscarriage of justice. This week, Melbourne University Islamic Studies lecturer Kylie Moore-Gilbert, who was sentenced to 10 years in Iran on espionage charges, was moved to what is described as the worst women's prison in the world. Her friends and colleagues and even federal MPs from both major parties are now calling on the federal government to do more to secure Kylie's release. Kylie has already spent nearly 2 years in prison after being arrested while attending an educational conference in Iran and convicted of espionage, charges which she has always denied. And while the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade is saying they're doing everything they can to secure Kylie's release, given her prison transfer and significant fears about her welfare, there are legitimate concerns that government isn't doing enough. And as a result, her friends have started a new website, freekylie.net, to put further pressure on government to use diplomatic channels to free Kylie. Now, have you ever been creeped out when you receive social media ads about something you just searched for online or spoke about with someone on the phone? In a world-first move, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission has launched legal action against Google for allegedly taking users' personal information without their knowledge or consent, which could set an international precedent. And in a survey, the ACCC found that, surprise, surprise, more than 80% of Australians don't want their personal information used in the manner that Google and other tech giants like Facebook have been doing for profit. The ACCC chairman, Rod Sims, said that we are taking this action because we consider Google misled Australian consumers about what it planned to do with large amounts of their personal information, including internet activity on websites not connected to Google. Concern is often directed at how government collects and uses personal information. Until now, little attention has been paid to how tech companies gather and exploit our private information, but it is time a light was shone here, and what a courageous and welcome move by the ACCC to take an international lead to finally do so. And this week, Lyle Shelton became the third out of us 10 Good Source contributors to have legal action taken against them. Why? Well, Lyle had written a blog post in relation to a drag queen story time held at a Brisbane City Council public library titled Why Queenie and Diamond Goodrim Are Dangerous Role Models for Children. Based on this blog, Queenie and Diamond Goodrim made a complaint to the Queensland Human Rights Commission under anti-discrimination legislation. Last year, Good Source contributor Mareika Ranci had defamation action taken against her by Delcy Cat, a queer events organiser. Mareika had written a Facebook post about Delcy Cat's youth events. Under her post, some people unknown to her posted some nasty comments about Delcy Cat, and when Mareika saw them, she deleted them. But the law says that you are the publisher of all material on your Facebook page, even the comments of others not written by you. And so Mareika, a suburban mum of 4 school-age children, had to settle for the sum of $100,000. How can mega corporate entities like Facebook, who have policies on content and reporting of offensive material and have the power to remove any material they consider offensive or even shut down someone's page entirely, social media corporations that habitually censor people all of the time, simultaneously claim that they are not the publisher of material on their platform defies logic and is a question I too ask. How people who write comments are not held solely responsible for their own words, which may be defamatory, but the person whose page they write it on are, even when those comments are deleted as soon as they are seen by the page, is another issue that makes zero sense. But this is a law that has been confirmed by Australian courts, a law which protects powerful mega corporations like Facebook and throws individuals who use their platforms to the wolves. Bernard Gaynor has been subject over the last 7 years to 37 complaints, all brought by serial complainant Gary Burns under New South Wales anti-discrimination legislation. For example, for Bernard highlighting that children were exposed to sexually explicit behaviour at the Mardi Gras. All 33 complaints that have been heard so far, every single one has been dismissed. This week, Bernard learned that he will not be receiving any of the costs awarded in his favour because Gary Burns had successfully applied for bankruptcy. There are still 4 complaints yet to be dealt with in New South Wales, even though Bernard lives in Queensland, but there is hope, given that Burns is now bankrupt, that they might be withdrawn. To defend Burns's complaints, Bernie has had to sell his home, spend over $400,000, and now he has no assets left. All this only for every complaint brought by Burns and dealt with so far to be dismissed with costs awarded against him, which he will never see. Your support for these fellow Good Source contributors is greatly appreciated. The stress and cost not only to them personally, but to their families to keep speaking truth is incredible. The goal of these activists is to silence them and in turn all of us. Don't let them win. Well, that's another week wrapped up. Make sure you subscribe to goodsource.news, like and leave a comment here. Make sure you tune in to George Christensen's podcast every Saturday, Conservative One. This week, he has a great interview with Drew Pavlou, who was censored by his university for criticising the Chinese Communist Party. Well, after all of the heaviness going on, here's a hilarious clip of US university students reacting to quotes from the Democrat presidential candidates when they were told they were Trump quotes to leave you with.
The White House released an early transcript of the State of the Union. Going to get your reaction to a few of the more controversial quotes. Okay. Talking to black voters, trying to win their support, saying, quote, "The other side is going to put y'all back in chains." What do you think of that one?
That's inappropriate. That should not be spoken like that.
I mean, I think that's just flat out racist.
Nah, that's pretty horrendous.
We should get a new president, probably. We shouldn't have someone like that as a role model for kids.
I don't think anyone is trying to do that.
Talking about North Korea, this administration's success will be judged on whether we can eliminate North Korea's nuclear weapons and verify they're gone once and for all.
Well, that sounds very threatening, as if we're going to be executing him completely.
That it's warmongering, and I also think that there's other things to focus on with North Korea than just nuclear weapons.
I think it would be warmongering, but also it's just a part of his rhetoric to assert dominance and assert American exceptionalism, things like that. So it doesn't really surprise me that he said something like that.
Knowing him, he's very irrational. And,
yeah, I'd say slightly inaccurate.
Next up, talking about inner city violence and gun violence, saying, quote, "Those kids think they're going to get killed anyway because all their friends are getting killed. They just don't have any long-term focus or anything. It's a joke to have a gun. It's a joke to pull the trigger to them."
Yeah, so, I mean, he's saying that because these are communities of people of color, and it's not even veiled racism, it's just racism.
That's flat out ridiculous and very just not appropriate language, I feel like.
Oh, what?
I think that's pretty unrealistic.
To kind of put all the blame for gun violence on those kids and not the people who are manufacturing them and the people who are selling them is an issue in and of itself.
I feel like that's really belittling to the people in those areas to say, oh, they don't care, when there are many people who are trying to better their situation.
Next up, talking about Israel-Palestine, obviously hot button issue for a lot of people. Quote, "When Palestine and Hamas put rocket launchers next to hospitals and schools, they're using civilians to protect their military. I believe Israel has a right at that point to defend itself." What's your take?
I think he needs to use more peaceful language, and I think it needs to be taken care of in a more peaceful, diplomatic way.
I'm very pacifist, so I really don't support war, so I don't support any of that at all.
Using that kind of language is very charged.
He has Israel all messed up. I mean, and a lot of people do, but him especially. I mean, Israel isn't the one that we should be backing at all.
What if I told you all these quotes are actually 2020 Democratic candidates quotes?
Ooh, I would believe you.
They are.